They laughed when a billionaire daughter became a waitress. 3 months later, they begged her. Before we begin the story, please leave a comment letting us know where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. There was once a young woman named Emily Carson, daughter of Texas real estate billionaire Robert Carson. To the outside world, Emily had it all. Designer clothes, private jets, and a mansion with more rooms than she could count. People called her lucky, envied her lifestyle, and assumed she was just another spoiled rich girl who never worked a day in her life. But behind closed doors, Emily felt trapped. Her father had mapped out every inch of her future, what school she would attend, what man she would marry, and even how she should act in public. No one seemed to care what she actually wanted. One day, after yet another tense dinner with her father about marrying a wealthy business partner's son, Emily snapped. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She simply stood up, walked out, and decided to take control of her life, on her own terms. The next morning, without telling anyone in her family, Emily drove to a small town in rural Texas. She wanted a place where no one knew her, where no one would treat her like royalty. She had found that place in the form of a dusty roadside diner called Ruby's Diner. The sign was faded, the paint chipped, and the place smelled like bacon grease and burnt coffee. But something about it felt real. When she walked in, heads turned. Behind the counter stood a tough-looking woman in her 60s. Her name tag read Ruby, the owner herself. She glanced at Emily's crisp white blouse, manicured nails, and clean shoes. "You lost, sweetheart?" Ruby asked, raising a brow. "No, ma'am," Emily replied, her voice steady. "I'm here to apply for a job." Ruby chuckled. "You want to work here?" "Yes, I do." Emily nodded. "Have you ever washed dishes, taken orders from drunks at 2 a.m., cleaned a toilet with your bare hands?" Emily hesitated. "No, but I'm willing to learn." Ruby stared her down for a few seconds, then shrugged. "Fine, be here at 6 a.m. tomorrow. Don't be late. We'll see how long you last." The next morning, Emily showed up in jeans and a plain t-shirt. No makeup. Hair tied up. She looked nothing like the girl who had stepped in the day before. Inside, the other staff were already moving at lightning speed. One of them, a tall, no-nonsense woman named Grace, looked Emily up and down and smirked. "So the princess came back?" Emily forced a smile. "Just here to work." "Sure," Grace muttered, handing her a rag and pointing to a table. "Start by wiping that mess, and try not to break anything." Emily got to work. Within an hour, she had spilled orange juice on a customer, dropped a tray of eggs, and accidentally knocked over a stack of plates. Every mistake was met with groans, eye rolls, and sarcastic comments from the staff. Customers whispered. Some laughed. "That's Robert Carson's daughter, right?" one whispered to his buddy. "What's she doing here, playing waitress?" Another chuckled. "Probably filming some reality show." Ruby watched it all from behind the counter, saying nothing. Emily knew Ruby was testing her. Everyone was. She could feel the judgment in every stare, every sigh. That night her back ached, her hands were blistered and her feet throbbed. But she didn't cry. She didn't run home. She climbed into a tiny bed at the rundown motel she had checked into the day before and stared at the ceiling. "This is what I wanted," she whispered. "To prove to them, and to myself, that I'm not just a rich man's daughter." The next morning, she was back at the diner, 15 minutes early. "Didn't think you'd come back," Grace said, folding her arms. "I'm not going anywhere," Emily replied. And with that, she tied her apron tight and got ready for another day of humiliation, judgment, and change. Emily's second day at Ruby's Diner started just like the first, fast, loud, and messy. But this time, the novelty of the billionaire's daughter playing waitress had worn off. Now the staff weren't just curious, they were annoyed. Grace wasted no time assigning Emily the worst tasks possible. "Clean the bathrooms," she barked, tossing her a mop. Emily didn't flinch. She took the mop and got to work scrubbing floors, wiping sinks, and cleaning toilets. She even unclogged the men's room when it backed up during lunch rush. When she came back out, Grace laughed. "Didn't think your soft little hands could handle that." Emily didn't respond. She was already wiping down tables. Customers weren't any kinder. One man waved his cup aggressively. "Refill. Been waiting 10 minutes. "I'm sorry, sir," Emily said politely, reaching for the pot of coffee. He sneered. "You better be. What are they hiring these days, charity cases?" Another customer snapped his fingers at her from across the diner. "Hey, Barbie. I asked for eggs over easy, not scrambled." Emily bit her tongue and apologized again. At one point, she spilled a plate of pancakes on the floor. Grace let out a dramatic gasp. "Wow, this girl's gonna bankrupt us." Laughter echoed from the kitchen. Ruby didn't say much. She simply watched. Her arms were always crossed. Her expression unreadable. But every so often, when no one was looking, Emily caught her staring. The days blurred together. Emily was always the first to arrive and the last to leave. She worked through burns from hot pans, muscle aches from lifting crates, and endless verbal jabs from co-workers. Behind her back, they called her princess, soft hands, and even rich trash. Once, Emily overheard 2 employees whispering near the dish pit. "She won't last a week," one said. "She's just playing poor," the other added. "Wait till Daddy calls her home." But she didn't quit. She smiled through gritted teeth and pushed through. After 2 weeks, the diner got even busier. A food blogger had randomly featured Ruby's pancakes in a viral post, and crowds started rolling in. With the rush came chaos. Emily worked 12-hour shifts, barely stopping to breathe. She took orders, ran food, cleaned spills, and even helped prep in the kitchen when short-staffed. Grace continued to ride her hard. "You forgot the pickles again," she snapped one afternoon, slamming a plate back on the counter. "I'll fix it," Emily said, wiping sweat from her brow. "You better, because next time I'm not covering for your mistakes." Despite the pressure, Emily improved. She learned to balance 5 plates at once, take 3 tables at a time, and remember orders without writing them down. She made fewer mistakes. Some regulars even began smiling at her. "You're still here?" one older customer joked. "Guess you're tougher than you look." Emily gave a tired but genuine grin. "I get that a lot." But for every kind word, there were 3 more cutting ones. Late one evening, after the last customer left and the doors were locked, Emily was wiping down the counter when Grace approached. "Why are you really here?" Grace asked bluntly. Emily turned. "I told you I wanted to work." "Yeah, sure." "But why here? You could buy this whole diner and turn it into a boutique or something." Emily looked down at her rag. "Because I needed to know if I could do something real. If I could survive without money, without people handing me everything." Grace scoffed. "Well, congrats. You're surviving, barely." Ruby walked out of the office just in time to hear that. "She's doing more than surviving," Ruby said, her voice firm. Grace looked surprised. Emily froze. Ruby looked at Emily. "Come in early tomorrow. I want you on the breakfast line." "Wait, seriously?" Grace blurted out. Ruby didn't answer her. She just walked back into the office and closed the door. Grace shook her head. "Don't get cocky, princess. You mess up back there, and it's your head." Emily didn't say anything. But for the first time since she started, she allowed herself a small moment of pride. The next morning, Emily showed up even earlier. She helped prep eggs, flip pancakes, and plate orders with surprising focus. Ruby gave minimal instruction, but she didn't correct her much either. When customers complimented the food, Ruby said nothing, but the corner of her mouth twitched, just barely, in what might have been a smile. Later that day, while taking out the trash, Emily caught her reflection in the diner's back window. Her hair was frizzy. Her shirt had grease stains. Her hands were raw and red, but for the first time in her life, she liked the woman she saw. No filters. No makeup, no spotlight, just Emily. Just real. Emily had come to Ruby's diner expecting to be ignored or mocked, but not hated. Yet every day she clocked in knowing the judgment would be waiting. The only difference now, she stopped caring. She didn't flinch when customers slammed their coffee cups. She didn't blink when Grace barked another sarcastic comment. And she certainly didn't let herself break down when her feet throbbed so bad she could barely walk home. Because Emily wasn't there to be liked. She was there to earn it. By the end of her third week, she knew how to prep hash browns in under 2 minutes. She could recognize which regular wanted rye toast without even asking. She even developed a rhythm with Ruby in the kitchen. No words needed, just a nod and a handoff. Still, the whispers never fully stopped. That's Carson's girl, right? Must be some rich kid punishment thing. She probably still sleeps on silk sheets. One afternoon, a group of high school seniors came in for lunch. Loud, laughing, the kind that thought the world owed them something. Emily brought their drinks to the table. One of the girls raised her phone and giggled. "Oh my God, guys, it's her," she said. She flipped the camera around and hit record. "Say hi to TikTok, Emily Carson. Wait, do you even know how to pour water without spilling it?" Emily froze for a second. The phone was inches from her face. The whole diner could hear the laughter. Grace chuckled under her breath from the counter, but Emily didn't react. She didn't cry. She didn't even speak. She calmly poured each glass of water, perfectly, no spills, then smiled politely and walked away. The girl looked disappointed that her prank didn't work, but the video still made it online, and within 48 hours, it had over 30,000 views. That night, Emily sat in her tiny motel room, scrolling through the comments on the clip. Why is she humiliating herself like this? Girl, go back to your mansion. Fake humility is still fake, but there were others. Respect. She didn't even flinch. People need to leave her alone. At least she's working. Bet she lasts longer than most of you. Emily didn't reply to a single comment. She turned off her phone, climbed into bed, and stared at the ceiling. She was tired, physically and emotionally, but something in her had shifted. She wasn't just proving herself to Grace or Ruby or a bunch of high schoolers anymore. She was proving it to herself. The next day was one of the busiest the diner had seen. Ruby was short-staffed, and a local news crew had randomly picked Ruby's for a Best Local Eats segment. Panic set in as the line grew out the door. "Emily!" Ruby barked. "We're drowning!" "You up for this?" Emily tied her apron tighter. "I've got it." She flew across the floor, taking orders, calming impatient customers, grabbing extra napkins, and helping the kitchen staff refill ingredients. She moved like she'd been doing it for years. Grace nearly dropped a plate watching her. Even Ruby seemed impressed. That evening, after the rush had passed, the staff sat slumped in chairs, catching their breath. Grace looked over at Emily and tossed her a water bottle. "Not bad today, princess," she said. "Thanks," Emily replied with a smirk. "I'm learning." Ruby walked over, arms folded. "You saved our butts in there," she said. "Didn't think you had it in you." Emily looked up. "Neither did I at first." Ruby nodded. "There's something different about you. You don't quit. Most girls like you would have cried and called their daddy by now." Emily shrugged. "I left him behind for a reason." There was a long silence. Then Ruby said quietly, "I'm still watching." "But I'll admit, you've surprised me." Coming from Ruby, that felt like a medal of honor. The next morning, something else surprising happened. A tip envelope sat in Emily's locker. Inside was a folded note that read, "You're tougher than I thought, G." And tucked inside, a $20 bill. Grace would never admit it, but it was her handwriting. Emily smiled, then tucked the bill away like it was a trophy. From that day forward, everything shifted. Customers started asking for her by name. "She's the only one who gets my coffee right," one old man grinned. "She remembers my kids' allergies," another mom added. Even Grace grew tolerable. Still bossy, still blunt. But the insults faded. And when one cook made a crude joke about Emily, Grace actually defended her. "Keep it shut," she snapped. "She's done more in 3 weeks than you have in 3 years. Emily was still tired, still sore, still struggling to fall asleep in a cheap motel bed. But something inside her had changed. For the first time in her life, she was building something that no one could take away from her. Not money, not her father, not her last name, just Emily. Just real, and she was just getting started. By now, Emily had found her rhythm at Ruby's diner. She no longer felt like an outsider, even if some people still whispered when she walked by. She woke up before sunrise, tied her apron like armor, and stepped onto the battlefield of hash browns, coffee orders, and burned toast. Then one afternoon he walked in. The lunch rush had just ended. Emily was refilling ketchup bottles when the front door opened, and a man stepped in. Tall, lean, grease-stained t-shirt, and hands that looked like they could rebuild an engine blindfolded. His dark brown eyes scanned the room as if he'd been here before, but hadn't returned in a while. He approached the counter. "Afternoon, ma'am," he said to Ruby, his voice deep but warm. "Can I get a burger and fries to go?" Ruby nodded. "Sit wherever. Emily'll bring it out." Emily froze mid-step. She didn't know why, but something about the man made her nervous. Not in a bad way. He wasn't rude or loud, just calm. Confident, real. She took his order to the back, her hands suddenly clumsier than usual. Grace raised an eyebrow. "You good?" "I'm fine," Emily muttered. A few minutes later, she walked the plate to his table. "Burger and fries," she said. He looked up. "Thanks." "You're new here?" Emily nodded. "Sort of." "You're good. Place runs smoother than I remember." She gave a shy smile. "We try." He stuck out his hand. "I'm Lucas." "Emily," she said, shaking it. His grip was firm, but not too much. Just right. Over the next few days, Lucas started showing up more often, always after the rush. Always sitting at the same table by the window. He never said much, just ate quietly and paid in cash. But he always asked for Emily. One day, as she poured him a glass of iced tea, she finally asked, "So, what do you do, Lucas?" "I'm a mechanic," he replied. "Got a small shop down the road. Or had one." She raised an eyebrow. "Had?" he sighed. "Landlord sold the building. No notice. One day I was under a car, next day, bulldozers." Emily winced. "That's awful." "Yeah," he nodded, "but I'll figure it out. Been saving up. I'll start again. Somehow." Emily was quiet for a moment. "You really love it, huh?" "Fixing cars," he smiled. "It's in my blood." Later that evening, she couldn't stop thinking about him. There was something different about Lucas, his drive, his calm strength. He reminded her of everything she wasn't supposed to want. He didn't care about brands or family names. He didn't ask where she was from or what car she drove. And that made her both relieved and terrified, because she was still lying. One night after closing, Lucas lingered while Emily wiped down tables. "You always this serious?" he asked, sipping a cold soda. She laughed lightly. "I guess." He tilted his head. "You don't talk much about yourself." "Not much to say," she replied. "That's so," he said, "'cause you don't look like someone who grew up around here." Emily hesitated, her heart pounding. "I moved here for a fresh start," she said carefully. Lucas studied her for a second, then nodded. "We all need that sometimes." Then he stood, dropped a tip on the table, and walked out. Emily picked up the cash, but it wasn't just bills this time. Folded beneath the money was a hand-drawn sketch, a quick pencil drawing of the diner, and her wiping a table. She smiled. It wasn't perfect, but it was thoughtful, real. Just like him. As weeks passed, their connection grew. Lucas started showing up more often, sometimes with a small part from an engine or a notebook of ideas for his new garage. He'd talk, and she'd listen. She shared her love for music and old books. He told her stories of cars, struggles, and people who disappeared when times got tough. And little by little, Emily began to fall for him. But with every laugh, every shared story, the guilt inside her grew. Because he didn't know who she really was. Not her last name, not the mansion. Not that she could probably buy him a new shop 10 times over and not notice the dent in her bank account. To Lucas, she was just Emily, the waitress, and she wasn't ready to lose that. One night, while walking her home, Lucas turned to her. "You're different, you know," he said. She smiled. "Different good or different bad?" "Good," he said. "Like the kind of person you don't meet twice." Emily's chest tightened. She wanted to tell him everything, but instead she just said, "You too." They walked the rest of the way in silence. But their hands brushed once, and neither of them pulled away. Back at the diner, Grace and Musa couldn't stop teasing. "Look at her blushing. Is that the Lucas, garage guy? Y'all are like a soap opera." Emily rolled her eyes, but even Ruby noticed the glow on her face. "You falling for that mechanic?" she asked one morning while slicing tomatoes. Emily didn't answer right away. Then she whispered, "I might be." Ruby gave a small grunt. "Just be careful. Real life ain't a romance movie." Emily smiled. "I know." But deep down, she wasn't so sure. Because for the first time since she left everything behind, her heart was finally on the line. And she had no idea how long she could keep her secret buried. By now, Emily's days at Ruby's diner felt like second nature. She moved through the kitchen with confidence. Her name no longer whispered with sarcasm, but called out with respect. Even Grace had stopped using the nickname Princess, but her heart was less steady. Because every time she saw Lucas, every time he smiled at her, listened to her, looked at her like she was the most down-to-earth girl he'd ever met, the guilt grew heavier. She wasn't who he thought she was, and the longer she waited to tell him the truth, the harder it became. Lucas came in almost every day now, always with something new, a small engine part, a joke, or a story about a customer from his old garage. Emily loved every minute. Their conversations grew longer, more personal. One slow afternoon, they sat at his usual table, sipping iced tea while the jukebox hummed in the background. "You ever think about where you'll be in 5 years?" Lucas asked. Emily paused. "Hopefully, still standing, still happy." Lucas smiled. "That's more honest than most people." He told her about his dream to reopen a bigger, better garage, one where he could train young mechanics and give jobs to those trying to rebuild their lives. "People gave up on me before," he said. "But if I get this place going again, maybe I can pay it forward." Emily looked at him, admiration in her eyes. "You're amazing," she said softly. Lucas laughed. "Nah, just a guy with a wrench and a dream." That night, Emily lay awake in her tiny motel bed, staring at the ceiling. She clutched a small, leather-bound notebook, the one she'd used since day one to write down her thoughts. She flipped to a blank page and wrote, "He's everything real, and I'm still hiding." She closed the book and pressed it to her chest. "I can't keep lying," she whispered. The next morning, Ruby handed her a flyer. "Local business contest," she said. "Big prize, cash and tools for a new startup." "You should tell your mechanic." Emily's eyes widened. "Lucas could win this," she murmured. "Then help him," Ruby said. "But don't do it for the wrong reasons." Emily looked up. "What do you mean?" Ruby stared at her for a long beat. "Don't try to fix your guilt by giving someone else a shortcut. He deserves honesty more than charity." Emily swallowed. Ruby didn't know the full truth, but she knew enough. That night, Emily told Lucas about the contest. His eyes lit up like she'd handed him a future on a silver plate. "You serious?" he asked. "You think I've got a shot?" "You've got more than a shot," she said. "You've got a story people want to believe in." Lucas grinned. "Will you help me with the application?" "Of course." They stayed late at the diner after hours, spreading papers across the counter. Emily helped him refine his proposal, sharpen his pitch, even sketch the layout of his dream garage. "I don't know what I'd do without you," Lucas said quietly, looking at her across the table. Emily's heart ached, because she knew what he didn't. The day Lucas submitted the application, he hugged her. Not in a casual way, but in a way that said everything. "I feel like I'm finally getting somewhere," he said. "And it's because of you." Emily hugged back, her eyes stinging. "You did the work," she whispered. "I just helped you see it." Later that night, Musa cornered her in the break room. "So what's the deal with you two?" he asked with a grin. Emily rolled her eyes. "Nothing official." Grace leaned against the fridge. "Looks official to me. You've got that soft smile, that I think I'm falling look." Emily stayed silent. "You like him, don't you?" Grace asked, suddenly serious. Emily nodded. Grace tilted her head. "Then tell him the truth before it's too late." Emily knew she was right. But how could she? What if he walked away? What if he never looked at her the same? What if the man who saw her as real suddenly only saw a billionaire's daughter playing pretend? The day the contest finalists were announced, Lucas burst into the diner holding a piece of paper in his hand. "I made it," he said, breathless. Emily jumped up from the booth and hugged him tight. "You're gonna win," she said. He smiled. "Only because of you." No, she thought. In spite of me. Later that night, as they walked home under the stars, Lucas turned to her. "Can I ask you something?" Emily's heart jumped. "Of course." He stopped walking. "Why were you really at Ruby's that day? That first day I saw you. You looked like someone who had never carried a tray in her life." Emily froze. "I told you," she said carefully. "I needed a fresh start." Lucas stared at her, eyes searching. "You're not like most people here." "I know," she said softly. "But I've worked hard to be." He nodded slowly. "You're different, but not in a bad way. I feel like there's more to you than you let on." Emily bit her lip. "There is," she whispered. But she didn't say more. Not yet, because she knew the moment she spoke the full truth, everything could fall apart, and she wasn't ready to lose him. Not yet. The night before the business contest finals, Lucas was calm, but Emily wasn't. She sat alone in her motel room, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Her waitress uniform was folded neatly on the chair. Her shoes were muddy, her hands were rough. On the outside, she looked like any other hard-working diner girl. But the lie was getting heavier by the day. She opened her notebook and flipped to a page she'd marked weeks ago. The first line read, "I left to become real. But am I still fake if I'm hiding?" Tears welled in her eyes. She had to tell him, even if it meant losing him. The next morning, Ruby's diner buzzed with energy. Customers crowded tables, the smell of bacon filled the air, and Lucas showed up wearing a clean button-down, something Emily had never seen him in before. He grinned. "Big day." "You're gonna win," Emily said, forcing a smile. "Not without you," he replied. They didn't have much time to talk. Emily was slammed with orders, and Lucas had to leave for the event. But before he walked out the door, he leaned in and whispered, "I've never trusted anyone the way I trust you." And that's what broke her. That evening, Emily stood outside the diner long after her shift ended, hands trembling. The sun had dipped behind the trees, casting long shadows on the cracked pavement. When Lucas pulled up in his old pickup truck, she saw the sparkle in his eyes before he even said a word. "I won," he said, holding up the certificate. "I actually won," Emily smiled, but her lips shook. "I'm so proud of you. I can't believe it. I'm finally going to rebuild the shop." "Everything's changing." Emily took a breath. "Lucas, I need to talk to you." He paused. "What's wrong?" She looked him straight in the eyes. "My name isn't just Emily. It's Emily Carson." His smile faded. "As in, Carson Realty." "Robert Carson?" he asked slowly. She nodded. "He's my father." Lucas stepped back like he'd been slapped. "I didn't come here to lie to you," she said quickly. "I came here to escape that life. I needed to know if I could make it on my own. I didn't want people to see money when they looked at me. I wanted them to see me." Lucas was silent. Too silent. "I wanted you to see me," she whispered. "So all this time," he said, his voice cold, "you were pretending?" "No." She shook her head. "I was living, for the first time. I just didn't know how to tell you without ruining everything." "You helped me get into that contest," he said, eyes narrowing. "Did you rig it?" "No. I swear, I only asked a friend to make sure you saw the flyer. That's it. The idea, the pitch, the presentation, it was all you. You won because of who you are, not because of me." Lucas looked away, jaw clenched. "I can't believe I trusted you." Her chest caved in. "I never lied about how I feel," she said, voice cracking. "You're the realest thing I've ever known." Lucas shook his head slowly. "You had every chance to tell me. But you let me sit across from you day after day, opening up, while you kept this wall between us." Emily's tears spilled over. "I was scared." "So was I," he said, eyes full of disappointment. "But I still showed up." Then, without another word, he turned and walked back to his truck. She didn't stop him. She couldn't. She just stood there, shivering in the Texas evening air, watching the only man who'd ever seen her walk away. The next few days were brutal. Lucas didn't come to the diner. His usual table sat empty. Even Musa stopped teasing. Grace didn't say much, but Emily could feel her watching closely, like she knew everything that happened and didn't know what to say. Emily moved through her shifts like a ghost. She still showed up early, still worked hard, but her eyes were dull. Her smile was gone. The guilt gnawed at her. Not for who she was, but for not being honest sooner. For letting fear take the wheel when love had tried to steer. One afternoon, Ruby pulled her aside in the back hallway. "He hasn't come back." Emily shook her head. Ruby leaned against the wall. "You told him the truth?" "I did." Ruby studied her for a long moment. "Then you did the hardest part." Emily wiped her eyes. "But it still wasn't enough." "Maybe not today," Ruby said quietly. "But real love doesn't run forever. It wrestles. It breaks. Then it finds its way back, if it's meant to." Emily nodded, but didn't speak, because at that point, she wasn't sure what was meant to be anymore. The following week, Emily was finishing her shift when a small envelope was slid across the counter by Musa. No name, he said. Just dropped off a minute ago. Emily opened it. Inside was a folded piece of paper. Just one line. Still deciding if I can believe in both sides of you. L. Her heart skipped. He hadn't disappeared completely. He was still out there. Hurting, thinking, maybe still hoping. And so was she. Emily stared at the note in her hand, her fingers trembling. Still deciding if I can believe in both sides of you. L. It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't the end either. That night, she sat on the motel bed with the letter in her lap, her notebook open beside her. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel completely alone. Somewhere out there, Lucas was still thinking about her. Maybe still feeling something. 2 days later, he walked into the diner. No warning. No fanfare. Just the familiar jingle of the bell and the sound of his boots against the tile. Emily looked up from the counter, frozen. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She couldn't speak. He walked to his usual table. Sat down, looked at her, and smiled. "Coffee?" she managed to say. "Please." She brought the cup over, setting it gently in front of him. He looked up at her. "You look tired." She gave a weak smile. "Haven't slept much." "Me neither." There was a long pause before he finally said, "I've been thinking a lot." "I figured," she whispered. Lucas leaned back. "I was angry. Still am, honestly. But not because you're rich." "Then why?" "Because you didn't trust me enough to be real with me from the start." Emily nodded, eyes brimming. "I was scared if you knew who I was, you'd stop seeing who I am." He looked at her, softer now. "That's the thing. I always saw who you are. I just didn't know who you used to be." Emily sat down across from him. "I never lied about my feelings, Lucas. Everything I said, everything I did, it was real." He took a sip of coffee, watching her. "I know that now." That evening, they walked home together for the first time in weeks. He didn't hold her hand. Not yet. But he walked beside her. "I don't want your money," he said suddenly. "Even if I'm building something big now, I want to know I earned it." Emily looked at him. "Then let's build it together, as partners, no handouts." He smiled. "And no more secrets?" She took a deep breath. "No more secrets." The next month moved fast. Lucas's new garage broke ground just outside town. Emily helped with the paperwork, organizing inspections, and building a small social media page that brought in more attention than expected. Locals began rooting for him, especially when they learned he'd once been evicted with no warning, and still came back stronger. One morning, Ruby handed Emily a brown envelope. "What's this?" Emily asked. "Your last paycheck," Ruby said. "You're not a waitress anymore, honey." "You've got something bigger to build." Emily blinked. "You're letting me go?" Ruby grinned. "I'm promoting you to boss of your own life." Emily teared up. "Thank you." Ruby leaned in. "I've never been prouder of anyone in this place. You proved them all wrong, even yourself." On the day the garage opened, the whole town showed up. Balloons, music, barbecue. Someone even brought a band. Lucas stood in front of the brand new building. LJ Auto Repair, built from grit. He gave a short speech, but his voice cracked halfway through. "I wouldn't be standing here without a lot of people, but mostly one person. She came here with nothing but guts and a whole lot of questions about herself, but she's the reason this place even exists." He turned to Emily. "Come here," he said. She walked onto the small stage, unsure of what to say. Lucas looked at her in front of everyone. "I was afraid at first of who she was, of what we meant, but now I'm not afraid of anything, as long as she's beside me." Then in front of the crowd, he kissed her. That night, As they sat on the steps of the garage under the stars, Emily leaned her head against his shoulder. "Remember when I couldn't carry a tray without dropping something?" Lucas chuckled. "And now you run a garage." "Well, technically you run the garage," she smirked. "I just make it look good." He looked at her. "You changed my life, Em." She looked back. "You made me believe I could live mine." Somewhere down the road they'd talk about the future, about houses, kids, maybe even marriage. But not yet. For now they had a diner's worth of memories, a garage full of dreams, and a love built not on wealth or image, but on truth, pain, and persistence. Emily Carson, the billionaire's daughter, had finally become someone real. Not because she gave it all up, but because she fought to earn who she became. They laughed when she left her mansion to work in a diner. They mocked her, doubted her, and waited for her to fail. But 3 months later, they watched her build something real, with someone who saw her for who she truly was. Do you believe love can grow in the most unexpected places? Let us know in the comments. Rate this story from 1 to 10, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more emotional journeys just like this.